on this.
Hi, everyone. This is Lisa Rangel and Misty Muzeko from Chameleon Resumes. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're here today. It's a little different than what we normally do. Misty had this great idea. Misty, let me back up a minute. Misty's role with Chameleon is she speaks to all the parties that are interested in hiring us as our business manager. And her and I were regrouping during a weekly meeting that we have. And she was sharing with me a lot of the questions that she's observed over the year that are really similar, that prospective clients ask us about the market, about doing a search, and just really awesome information that we decided shouldn't be limited to those individuals who are considering hiring us. We wanted to share it with the whole Chameleon tribe, and it was a great idea she brought up. So here we are, and I wanted to introduce Misty. She's going to ask the questions that she's observed over recent months, and hopefully it can help you today.
All right. Hi everyone. So as the pandemic comes to hopefully a close in the coming months, there's been a lot of anxiety on the phone calls just about job searching, through the pandemic, after the pandemic, like how have things changed? And so a lot of the questions that I get asked on our calls are largely about how to job search within a pandemic. So I wanted to go over some of those today. So I'm going to ask the questions and Lisa is going to share her wisdom. Okay, so the first question, a big one that I get from a lot of the prospective clients is there anything job seekers need to do differently as the pandemic starts to wind down?
That is an awesome question. And, the answer is yes and no. And by that, I mean, it's what needs to be done differently is now you need to communicate on your resume, on your cover letters, on your interview stories, your exploratory conversations, everywhere you're intersecting with someone about your job search. And you need to outline what you've been doing during the pandemic and now after the pandemic. And, in some areas, they're starting to close down again. So it's not gonna be smooth sailing coming out for some areas. And, I think now it's about demonstrating your resiliency. It's outlining what you did to take care of your people. And by people, I mean employees, clients, vendors. It's outlining where you not only grew the business, but now it's a thing to preserve your business revenue. What steps you took to preserve what you have, or where you had to pivot, where forecasting was kind of blown out of the water and things happened that nobody predicted, but how did you pivot? So these are the opportunities that now you should be speaking about, either on paper, in video, in person, whatever the medium is, and show how in a modern contemporary way now, how you've achieved during this pandemic and post-pandemic time. So that's the yes. And the no part of that answer, which may sound a little perplexing, is frankly, we should have been doing this all along, and honestly, a lot of our clients have been doing it. I mean, I recruited, about now 12 years ago, and we focused on achievements as the way of setting people apart from the competing candidates that they were up against when they were going after jobs. So the no part for Chameleon is we've been doing this more or less the whole time. And, so it wasn't as big of a shift in terms of the philosophy behind how the documents were done. But now we're bringing more people up to speed with it. And so if you've been on my list for a while, you've seen that some of that has been consistent. So, so that's the yes and no. It really depends on your perspective. So if this is new sounding to you, then absolutely you need to do it differently going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's another level of, you have to have your accomplishments, you have to have your data specifics, you have to have all the stuff from before, but now you have to show your crisis management skills. Like, how did you pivot? What was your agile management skill? Like all the stuff that you did.
Right. How you handle downsizing compassionately, like if you had to downsize, like what you did to retain people during difficult times. Like these are all, relatively new topics for a lot of people that now need to be addressed. And needless to say, but I'm just going to say it, none of this should be task-based driven language. It should all be achievement based. And what you're bringing up now is we should be bringing up different types of achievements even than what we've been doing before.
Yeah, I think the focus on how you handled your team and your company throughout the pandemic is going to be key.
Right.
And I stole this from you, Lisa. You're saying is you're the person that people should be stuck in a foxhole with, because you will always be able to get them out of the foxhole. So that's your skill, right? You can always get people out of the foxhole. But this is the same thing. You've got to show the company how you're going to get them out of a foxhole again, right, should another pandemic come around, them right?
How you were their go-to. Outline your go-to, designation within your department, your area, your company, or where you stepped up in other areas you aren't normally a part of, but you had to.
Right.
So show where you were the point person. It's another way of, depicting how you're better than your competing candidates. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, awesome question.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So the next one, this is a great one because I know what you're going to say, but it's a great question. Question number 2. Is it a good time to look for a job?
We get that question a lot, don't we? Whether it's good times, bad times, in the middle times, we're always getting that question. And, the answer is yes, it is a good time to look for a job. And, not in any self-serving way, but the answer is almost always yes, but the answer is yes for different reasons. And you have to position yourself differently in different types of markets. You have to position yourself differently based on the industry that you're in and what's going on within your industry. You have to position yourself differently if you're doing a career change. But for now, it's a hot market because companies are now getting back to work. Even if there is going to be a second shutdown, God forbid, but even if there is one that comes up in the next few months, frankly, we've all been through this before. So now companies have systems to navigate this a little bit better. Not that it'll be great, but it won't be as extreme as it was when we were all blindsided by it, right? So, companies are going to continue to move forward. They're going to continue to open. It's going to, open up supply chains. They're going to need to be reestablished, reinvented, reopened if the current one is still working, because those supply chains were kind of disrupted a bit through this whole process. And frankly, the World Bank put out a prediction, prediction, I guess. The World Bank put out a prediction that they're anticipating the US economy to grow by 5.6%, which has never been that big of a prediction since World War II, which is 80 years ago. And also like Barron's and Bloomberg, all these financial publications are saying that over the past pandemic period, that Americans have saved $2.9 trillion in the pandemic. And it doesn't mean we didn't have additional expenses during the pandemic, but those during pandemic expenses did not exceed, the savings because people weren't spending during the pandemic on everything they normally did. So that's a lot of pent up savings and a lot of potential growth that even if it is bumpy as we proceed through the next, 6, 12, 18 months, that is still a ton of opportunity. And so you want to be able to find the companies that are going to excel in this opportunistic stage. And while there will be news stories that are, doom and gloom, and while there will be companies that suffer through it or don't go through the bumpy period well, just like there was during the pandemic, there are companies that are going to excel during this. And if you can position yourself for this once in a generational opportunity, it is an awesome time to look for a job, if you're positioned right and you're going after the right companies. So that's the key. And, it may sound self-serving, but even, the key is to look, again, we're doing this for the DIYers. We're doing this for everyone on the list. So, the key is to make your own opportunity. And obviously we're here to help if you need assistance, but the key is to do it yourself too. Don't sit on the sidelines while this passes you by.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of anxiety and worry about trying to find a job in such a seemingly chaotic time.
Right.
But as Lisa said, I think that given if you have a strategy, if you have documents that position you properly, and you can talk to your leadership story throughout the pandemic, if you have these three things and you can just rattle them off in a conversation or inside the interview, if you have a plan, you're going to fare really well. If you don't have a plan, well, that's a different story. But if you get organized and get yourself together, this is a great time. With lots of opportunity.
I mean, look, it may not be a linear, upward progression over the next, again, 6, 12, 18, 24 months. And it may not be upwardly linear in different industries, right? One might go down, one might go up, who knows, right? Mm-hmm. But as I said at the beginning of the pandemic, and even now with an upswing, even if it's an erratic upswing, there's there's ethical opportunity in chaos.
Right.
And leaders are needed more than ever during chaos. And so, people had the opportunity last year to show their leadership skills during chaos when it was ridiculously uncertain, ridiculously, unprecedented, and really have no clue what to do next. And it was, sometimes even educated guessing, right? Mm-hmm. Now it's a little bit more on the upswing by far comparatively, and we've been through it before. So, but it's still going to be a little chaotic, but you got to be in that position as again, one of those people that can lead people through it. And with uncertainty comes opportunity, and it's about being ready for it. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just think everyone should get a pencil out and write down the words. There's ethical opportunity in chaos. I think Jill, write that down, frame it, put it somewhere, put it on a sticky note and put it on your laptop. Yeah. So I think one of the saddest stories that I've heard repeatedly, probably 80 to 90% of the time when I'm taking these calls, I hear a variation of the sad story is that the prospective client's job was restructured, or they were downsized, or they were just laid off. But, in essence, they basically lost their job because of all the restructuring that happened back in 2020. Yeah. So question number 3, I usually get question number 3 because they'll say something along the lines of, I now have a gap on my resume because I was laid off from COVID. Is this a problem?
It's not a problem. And here's why. So when I was a recruiter, I've been a recruiter during the downturn of 2001 in New York City. I ran a downtown New York City office during 9/11. I've been through the downturn and upswing again during 2008 and 9 as a mostly financial recruiter. I oversaw some other areas as well, but my start in recruiting was really in accounting and finance. And I was in accounting and finance, implosion. And now this is the third, downturn and upturn that I'm witnessing and a part of, right? And there was gaps. People had gaps in their resumes when they were laid off, from Lehman Brothers and other financial services firms in 2008. And there was a lot of downsizing, particularly in Manhattan in 2001, and people had gaps. And I can tell you that good recruiters know that the answer to these obvious questions are going to be, because of COVID, because of the gap, of my company. And they don't want to focus on the negative, and they don't want to focus on the obvious. They may not even ask and assume, because it's just, when there's so many people that are affected that way, it starts to lose, thankfully, its negative ramifications of it happening, right? If you're laid off in the height of an awesome market, you got bigger problems, right? So then they're like, well, what's wrong? What happened? Everybody's hired. Why aren't you? So that's a bigger hurdle to overcome than being one of, hundreds of thousands, even millions, frankly. I'm thinking of a small regional area when I say hundreds of thousands, but, millions globally, right, that have been out of work because of this. So it becomes like a non-issue and an obvious answer. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be prepared for it, but you can't wear it like this, scarlet letter of shame, because everybody's got something, and honestly, even the people that are employed during this period are going into interviews going, oh my God, everything fell apart. How the hell am I gonna sound like a rock star on this interview, right?
Mm.
So I'm telling you, everybody's got to hang up, and what employers want to see is what you did during the pandemic, what you learned from it. You know, even if it was a struggling time for you, that you're diplomatically, you know, vulnerable. You don't need to use it as a therapy session, but, you know, be diplomatically vulnerable, show what you learned, show what you did. And they want to see your resiliency in it, because frankly, if you can demonstrate how you handled yourself during that difficult period honestly, it subliminally sends a message to that employer. If something difficult happens on the job, you're not going to lie about it.
Yeah.
Or you're not going to BS about it, you know, and you're going to be, you know, diplomatically honest about it, so that everybody can just handle it. It shows how you handle problems. And so, you know, I think that you just got to own it, realize you're not unique in a good way, because it was a period where it happened to a lot of people. And then just focus on what you learned, what you did, and, you know, and just focus on your assets then, on how you can do the job. And if it's a recruiter that's really harping on it, I can tell you they're not that good. They don't have other questions they want to ask, and it probably isn't the right spot for you if that's all they're harping upon, when it's so obvious why you have a gap. So you kind of have to let it go too, then, if they're really jerky about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I mean, if you do have a gap on your resume, know that you're in good company, because lots of people that I speak to are in the exact same boat. And it might have been 16 months at this point. They might have been, you know, out of a job for 18 months, right? So it's okay. And I think, you know, to Lisa's point, if it becomes a point of like they're harping on it like that, then like why focus on it so much? It's a general problem at this time. But I do get a lot of people thinking it's very them specific, right? So it's their problem, but it's not. It's much
universal.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that can also, I mean, we've had some clients that have hired us over the last year that, you know, genuinely quit their job thinking like, oh, I'm going to take some time. I'm going to then, you know, I have some money put aside. I'm going to quit my job. And they did it in like December 2019 or January 2020. And they were like, oh, I'm just going to take a couple of months, and then I'm going to commit full time to looking for a job. And then all of a sudden, boom, like the pandemic happened. And now they were like, I quit, like, and I'm going to look like an idiot when, you know, and I'm like, no, you don't. Like, you just own where it was at, and that's it. You know, some people during the pandemic had to, you know, deal with their kids going to school, or they had to care for elderly people, or they delivered food to people who shouldn't be going to supermarkets, or, you know, so just focus on what you had to do or volunteered to do. What, you know, sometimes what was forced upon you is just the story, and that's it, you know, so you just got to own it. If it gets into stories about your health or someone else's health, or, you know, your marital situation, or your, you know, whether you have kids or not situation, where, you know, questions that shouldn't be asked on an interview, you know, that's why I say diplomatically vulnerable, like you don't necessarily need to disclose all that, you know, so say it in a diplomatic manner that still shows what you've been doing without sharing information that shouldn't be included in a hiring decision. But at the same time, you know, you're you, and, you know, you want to find the employers that accept you as you are. So, you know, if something becomes an issue, you got to wonder if it's the right place for you too. So,
yeah. Awesome. So that should ease some worry that I know some of our potential clients have.
I know.
Okay, so this is a pendulum swing question, because we're going to go to the other end of the spectrum here, and focus on the folks that do have jobs, and they had a job throughout the entire the pandemic, but was switched to remote. And we've got two more questions left, and these are really important questions. So just listen in for the next couple of minutes here. So a lot of our clientele, they had jobs, right? They were moved to remote, and now everything's changing again. So one of the big questions that we get in some of the calls is, well, I have a job, I don't like my job anymore, and I want to look for full remote jobs. I loved working remote. I want to stay remote. Can I change jobs and get a job that's fully remote? So they're looking now just for, you know, to kind of continue what they're doing. So is it feasible for people to look for fully remote roles?
It's very feasible. You know, there are employers that are staying remote, you know, past the official opening of September for a lot of companies. You know, I know like a bunch of the financial services firms in Manhattan are like, you must come back to work in September or else, you know, and they're being very dramatic about it. And, you know, I don't even mean that in a negative way when I say dramatic, because they're also trying to bring people back to the cities and to, you know, help the local businesses. So there's positives and negatives to these moves, right? Like I'm not looking to just vilify the employers by any means. But with that being said, you know, if your company is going back, you know, fully in person or partially in person, and you want none of that, then you just got to own it. You can ask them, maybe for your situation, they'll make an exception. You know, I'm sure you won't be the first one to ask, you know, but maybe you have a home situation that warrants you being home longer or indefinitely, or you got to start looking for companies that are attracting people for fully remote jobs. And then just, you have to make a change. Here's the thing though, a lot of people want those fully remote jobs. So you need to look the part to compete. You know, you can't just think like, oh, you know, I'll just look and somebody will hire me as a remote person. Like you have to, it's competitive. A lot of people want those remote jobs. And so you actually have, I think, if you were interested in working in person, I think you'd get hired in 5 minutes at certain companies, because they're losing people who want a remote job. You know, so I know that we've had clients and then just friends and family of mine who are like, oh my God, I can't wait to go back to work, because they like got to get out of the house, right? So not everybody wants a remote job. And, you know, so you just got to go where the culture, again, accepts you as you are.
Right.
You know, so if you're currently employed, if you know you're leaving, if you don't go fully remote, you might as well ask.
Right.
And see if it's possible, because then you don't have to move.
Yeah.
And if it's not, you just got to have, but I also wouldn't ask until, you know, your documents are updated. Again, whether you hire us or you do it on your own, the key is to just make sure your ducks are in the row before you make the move of asking. Because if they know you're not happy because they can't make you fully remote, they may suspect you might look. You know, so
I mean, I think also
being ready. It literally everything comes back to being ready, which is like our mission, you know, from day one. It's like, just be prepared, be ready, you know, because you just never, job security does not lie with the employer. The job security lies within each of us being ready.
Right. Yeah.
You know, to have documents, networks, inroads, where, you know, what can we leverage next, so we can at least shorten that time between positions, or have no time between positions because we've been prepared and got lucky at the same time. So that's really what it comes down to, is you just got to be ready.
Okay, awesome. That was a fantastic answer for question 4. So I'm going to swing right into question 5. This one's a little bit more sensitive of a question, and it's to do with how jobs have changed since restructuring. Many people were sort of working in their environments, loving their job, and then everything changed. And so their environment has significantly switched. So a lot of people come to the calls and they're not happy anymore in their jobs. So they tell me that since COVID, their job just isn't the same. They feel like the morale is really low, the environment's fairly toxic, the leadership has changed, like they're just not feeling it like they used to. So what they're saying is they're not leaving because of, you know, some significant change. They're just not really happy anymore.
Right.
So they come to the calls and they want to know, is it feasible, given that this is the reason for change, is it feasible for them to look for another job?
I mean, absolutely. I think one thing we've all learned during COVID, whether we're happy in our jobs or not, or, you know, we've just realized we need to be happy, right? Like, I mean, I think that the mindset we all had prior to COVID of, you know, work, and enjoy ourselves later, you know, or just not being able to slow down, like, it's not an option anymore for many of us, right? And part of what we need to do now is make the choices to make ourselves happy. And if it's not happening at a current employer, we have to take the steps to find the employers that have the work setup that is conducive to how we need and want to work, and have the values that we have, So we're inspired to go to work every day
Right.
and be a part of something that we're happy to be a part of. I think the days of the job for the paycheck and benefits has significantly been reduced. I'll never say it's over, because I don't think ever going to happen. But I think it was a big wake up call for many people of like, why the hell am I doing this? I'm missing my kids. I don't see my spouse. I'm, not advancing in other areas of my life. I don't have a partner. I don't have kids. I'm not able to care for my parents. I'm not able to see my parents because I'm always working so damn much, or I don't have a social life. And they're realizing, that you don't have to be miserable, or things don't have to be fully broken in order to make a change. It can simply be, it's not bad, but I'm just not happy.
Right.
And I know I can make it better. I think we've always had to, I think especially Americans, we've always feel like things have to be horribly broken and there has to be a crisis before we make a change. And I think COVID really showed us all that, things can be okay, not terrible. And if options exist with things opening up now, you can make changes to just move towards a better situation, or more towards happiness. And that is perfectly okay.
Yeah.
And so it absolutely is possible. You got to look at companies that have the work arrangements that work with you, and then again, companies that have values that you share. So it's easier to go to work, and even inspiring to go to work, right? It doesn't have to be bad. So.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to be there for like 8, 10, 12 plus hours a day.
Right.
You better enjoy what you're spending your time doing, right? And I think for a lot of our clients, when they come to us, this could be the last job they have, right? They could be working for another
a lot of
5, 10, 5, 10, 15 years. These are our senior executive, clients, and this is their last hurrah. So they certainly don't want something that they're going to be miserable in, because they want to leave. They want to end on a high note, right? So
I think something that most people don't realize or don't think of, and again, we usually share it with individuals that are hiring with us or on one-on-one conversations. So I'm really happy to do this here. Is, I think the key to being happy at work is acknowledge every employer has its negatives. And are those negatives something that totally don't really matter to you? That to me is the key to being happy at work.
Right.
Because if you're being all Pollyanna about it and expecting an employer to fulfill everything and do everything perfectly, I mean, you're going to be miserable at work, because at some point they're going to piss you off or disappoint you or something like that, right? But including the companies that are on like the best place to work lists, they all have their drawbacks. And the key is to know those up front as best you can. You're never going to know everything, and are those lists of drawbacks something that isn't a big deal for you, and sometimes even a positive for you? And then then you're going to be happy there, because those drawbacks or negatives don't bother you that much, or actually work within your life the way it's set up. So you have to know your negatives and make sure the job you're accepting isn't accentuating your negatives. And you got to be aware of the employer's negatives and make sure they're not like your biggest pet peeve that's going to like annoy you every day. And I think if you can match the negatives essentially in a good way, you really are setting yourself up to probably be happy at a job for a long time.
Yeah.
That to me is the key of happiness. You got to know the negatives.
If things have changed and your workplace is different than it was before 2020, which I imagine many of them are, and it's just not jiving, it is a-okay for that to be the reason to get a different job, right? Like, you have to be happy. You have one life. So, you better make it the best possible, right? So.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think, all in all, I think what we really want people to know is that there's absolute opportunity everywhere, especially now, especially in the next 6 months. It's going to be for those who are, well prepared and have a plan and are strategic and have the right documents. There is going to be massive amounts of opportunity. So if you are contemplating a change, or you're in an active job search, or you've been in an active job search for the past, 6, 12, 18 months and really striking out, then I think it's time to look a little bit deeper about what you can do about it. Not just sit here and wonder, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do next? So I should just go on another job board. Like, really get serious about the strategy that you're going to do next. Okay. Because really what you need to
start having conversations.
Start having conversations, right? Find your pathways out of this. I think everybody needs to be really clear on what they want to do next. That's key, okay? Because you've had a lot of time to think about it during the pandemic. So be clear about what you want to do. And then have your documents ready. Make sure they align specifically with this next role. Make sure that you're showing off your career brand. Make sure that you've got your leadership story nailed down. Make sure you've got proof of your crisis management skills. Like, have all that ready to rock and roll. And if you don't have any of that stuff and you're wondering, how am I going to get all of that stuff and make this next job search amazing, then I encourage you to have a call with me, because I can sit there with you and we can talk about some of the strategies. We can definitely talk about some of the solutions that we have that will help you out. Okay. So
Absolutely.
if you hop over to www.chatwithuslive.com, that will take you directly to my calendar. You can pick a time, you can pop your details in, and then we can have a quick chat. Okay, so that web address again was chatwithuslive.com. Okay, it's completely complimentary, it's a completely exploratory, but it's a chance to find a way out of this mess, as they say.
Absolutely.
All right. So anything else you want to add? Any final words of wisdom, Lisa?
No, this was really great. And this is a great idea you had. I'm glad we did it. I think the key really is, focus on you. You really need one job. You don't need to solve, the employment gap or the pandemic crisis or the pandemic boom or you don't need to solve any of the world's problems or your country's problems or your local area's problems. You really just need to focus on what you need changed and what steps you need to take to make those changes, and keep it really simple and focused, and it's all doable.
Awesome.
So thanks.
All right. Well, we are excited to hear your feedback. We are excited to chat with you. If you want to respond to any of the emails we send out, please do. We'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, go ahead and visit chatwithuslive.com and you can book a call with yours truly, and we can figure this out. All right, guys, have a wonderful rest of your day. Lisa, that was awesome. Thanks so much. And we will be talking to you guys soon. Take care.
Take care, everybody.
I don't know where the stop record button is. So